Now, of course, we begin with our big story countdown to the Michigan primaries. Now just one day away. Nikki Haley looking to beat expectations tomorrow, determined to stay in the race through Super Tuesday, despite repeatedly losing to Donald Trump by double digits. In fact, just 2 days ago, the former South Carolina governor even lost in her home state to Trump, who beat her there by 20 points. And the latest polling average from our partners at 538 shows him with a commanding lead over Haley once again in Michigan, beating her 78 to 21%. Now, in the meantime, we look at the Democratic side. Some members of Michigan's large Arab American and Muslim community are pushing to vote uncommitted, to send a message to President Biden over his support for Israel during its war with Hamas. Our Zorine Shah is live on the ground in Detroit. You've been talking with voters all day. Zorine, thank you so much for being here. So look, we all know Michigan is a key battleground state here, and a lot of people are asking the question, could President Biden possibly be looking at political embarrassment here? Zorine, some of our colleagues saying that this is really the first chance that some of the critics of the president, this will be their first chance to send him a message electorally.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be their first chance. And in fact, for some of these groups, the Arab groups, the Muslim groups out here, the first chance that I remember, from what I can best think of, is the first time that they are sending a message, period, to a president. These aren't groups that are typically very active in presidential politics, but they are incredibly upset and frustrated right now by what they're seeing going on in Gaza. A lot of these people have family back there. They've lost a lot of family, some up to 100 people, dozens and dozens of family members that they just have not been able to even contact in the last several weeks. So incredible frustration. And also, Kana, a lot of these folks are seeing a different reality than what you and I perhaps often see. When they open up their social media, they're seeing from credible news sources, from credible journalists, images of kids crying over their parents' graves, of kids who are in the hospital with their arms and legs amputated, just something that the average American doesn't typically see every day. They're just growing angrier and angrier that this president isn't taking action.
And it's clear that some of those images and what they're seeing is pushing this uncommitted option on this ballot, right, Zorine? This is, in a sense, a push by some Arab Americans and progressives to protest against Biden's handling of the war in Gaza. So, Zorine, how much momentum do you see there? I mean, is this Biden's biggest threat, this uncommitted option?
We'll see what happens tomorrow, but what some of these groups here are hoping for is that they can reach at least 10,000 uncommitted votes, because 10,000 is roughly the number that Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump by in 2016. And so they feel like if they can have that number, it'll prove that come November, this one group can actually be a threat to President Biden. But I also want to stress that it's not just Arab and Muslim voters, right? What we're seeing out here is that it appears to stretch far beyond. We spoke to a black voter just a few hours ago, a Jewish voter, and they both said they would be voting uncommitted. Look, when you have a state like this, when so many people have an Arab friend or a Muslim friend, they can really relate to what's going on and what they're seeing, and also their loss and their grief, which possibly could be impacting them.
Absolutely. And Zorine, what can be gained from, assessing the margins in this primary as well as overall turnout?
Yeah, we'll see what the overall turnout looks like. I think in the years past, it's roughly about 20%. I know, though, it's going to be incredibly rainy tomorrow, so we'll see what the turnout looks like. But look, I think the big number that Biden will be keeping his eye on is that uncommitted voter and then the votes that he gets. The Republican race is a totally different beast tomorrow, Kana. Only a third of the votes tomorrow will actually go towards the delegates. And then there's a separate event that's happening in a couple days. It's like a convention that they're holding where the rest of the delegates from there will then be allocated.
Yeah, that's such an important note, the way that this plays out in the calendar for the GOP, Zorine. Now let's look closely at some of the areas in the state that are traditionally Republican, right? But they've kind of moved away from the GOP in recent years. Is it some of those areas, Zorine, you think, along with perhaps Democratic strongholds where Nikki Haley could make her case?
It's so hard to know what her case is at this moment, right? I mean, what is her path? Even she can't really articulate that. I mean, look, she's not even going to be in Michigan tomorrow. Her path is going to be cut short. She's going to go to Colorado, a Super Tuesday state, where she'll be making her case there. But she's really pointing to Donald Trump's path. She's saying he doesn't really have one, in her opinion. She's saying he didn't get 40% of the vote in South Carolina just a few days ago. And she's saying that he wouldn't win in a general election. She's saying that she is trying to raise these red flags and sound the alarm, in other words.
Absolutely. All right, Zoreen Shaw, live for us in Detroit. Zoreen, thank you. I want to bring our big story now to our panel. So joining us today is our ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host, Mike Muse, our political contributor and senior editor of The Dispatch, Sarah Isker, former U.S. Senator from North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, and ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the LA Times, LZ Granderson. So thank you all so much for being here with us. Mike, all right, we're talking Michigan, not sports, though. On a recent trip, though, to Michigan, you know, President Biden, he went there, right? But he notably on his last trip, he didn't meet with the Muslim and the Arab American leaders. Instead, he met with the UAW. And in turn, you know, he showed up to protest, calling for a ceasefire. Mike, is the president's messaging falling flat in Michigan?
I think we're going to see tomorrow the number of that uncommitted voters that is going to happen. Now, as someone who was born and raised in Lansing, Michigan, I know the state very well. And the Arab American and Muslim community in Michigan is very strong, and they are very active, in particular in our democracy and in voting. And I think that what they would like to do is to be heard and to really express their vote through the uncommitted, to put pressure on President Biden in order to call for this ceasefire. The margins is going to be very slim with Michigan being such a critical swing state for any Democrat to win with that regard. And so he's going to have to listen, but also, too, he'll be able to see what they're saying tomorrow and then figure out how to work with them to bring some understanding. But on the flip side, the question also, too, remains is, like, what is the Arab American and Muslim community doing to put pressure on the other candidate, which is former President Trump, on his position on would he do a ceasefire? In the last statement that we heard in the fall, President Trump said he wants to see how this plays out. And so I think that we have to start bringing both into the conversation.
Right, and you may just see those voters just, you know, saying uncommitted on the ballot. Sarah, to you here, look, we see Trump, former president, giving up 30–40% of Republicans to Haley in some of these primaries. We see Biden, of course, with very low enthusiasm among Democratic voters. I liked your note, the sense here that in the end, after all of this talk, a lot of voters are really just going to go home to their candidates. Tell us about that.
That's right. What's sort of unusual is that we're actually seeing what looks to be a very normal primary, but it's two incumbents running in each primary. That's what I think is striking us as weird in some of this. But at the end of the day, the voters who are unhappy with Donald Trump right now voting for Nikki Haley, the voters who are unhappy with Joe Biden and are voting uncommitted, they aren't going to have much of an option come Labor Day as they realize this is a binary choice. And so what we say then is that those voters will go home to their respective political parties. It's a lot of why we use the term negative polarization. These voters aren't happy with their own party, with their own candidates, but they hate the other party and the other candidate more.
Yeah, and Heidi, what about these voters that potentially could cast this vote for uncommitted? And if you look further down the line, Heidi, into the general election, when every vote is going to count there in Michigan, do you think that some of those voters that go uncommitted or just stay home, I mean, that could severely impact President Biden's chances there?
Well, I think there's always a theory in politics that during primary season, you get your chance to express your dissatisfaction, but when it becomes a binary choice, and certainly for Arab Americans, there's nothing to recommend a vote for Donald Trump. It's a matter of how angry they are. And there's a rule in politics, you don't want to anger your base because they will take it out on you. And I think you're seeing this, but understand the dynamics in Gaza are ongoing. President right now is part of the negotiation for a ceasefire, hostage release. I think we're going to see a different political situation in the Mideast come Election Day, and that will help the president.
And also, I don't want to overlook the United Auto Workers Union there that's so significant. So, LZ, let's talk about that. Again, there's more than 400,000 members. Clearly, that could give President Biden an edge as they have backed him. But one thing, when you look back, LZ, at 2016, the UAW actually said that they think something like 1 in 4 of their employees still voted for Trump, despite them backing Hillary Clinton back in 2016. Do you think that Trump could garner some of those votes again this time around and that could help him?
Absolutely, 1,000%. You know, the thing that's interesting when it comes to unions in general is that, you know, race has always been utilized as a way to kind of keep the union powers from fully being its full self. And what I mean by that is race is the one thing you can use that would keep a poor white person voting against their own benefits because it's something that they view may not necessarily help people they don't like. And I know that might make some people uncomfortable, but that's the history of unions. When you think about union busting, that's exactly what has happened. That's what happened this past summer when both former President Trump and Biden both showed up in Michigan to campaign. Biden went to the union, whereas Trump actually showed up to a non-union location and talked to non-union employees. Why? Because he's talking to a different audience. So 1,000% the unions are somewhere that Trump can look for more votes. Mike is absolutely right. Michigan is the largest location of Muslims in America. This is going to be a strong message to Biden as well.
It certainly will be. Mike, Sarah, Heidi, and LZ, our thanks as always.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.